Chapter 9, Tony's Dilemma and Magneto's Change. Huijian stared at the item list for the instant and fell into thought. Buying Ultraman cards or purchasing mecha blueprints from another world were both possible solutions, but each had downsides. The Ultraman cards were outrageously expensive and consumable. There was no way the Earth's finances could sustain long-term use. The mecha blueprints, on the other hand, would let TPC develop follow-up models, but the initial investment would be high. Worse, Huijian couldn't explain where the designs came from. She didn't want anyone to know about the tavern. In the end, she sighed. "I need time to think this through," she told Jiangju. "No problem," Jiangju said, then brightened. "Oh, and Fanioxin, there's something here he can finish for us." He waved to summon Zhao Su. "Zhao Shu, come here." "Boss, you called me?" Zhao Shu looked between Huijian and the newcomer with curiosity. "This is Fanioxin," Jiangju said. "He can help you with getting the satellite into orbit." He pointed at the strange young man. "He can transform into a giant of light. At that speed, he can get it done in the shortest time." "A satellite?" Fanioxin's expression became puzzled. "What's going on?" Jiangju explained the situation. When Fanioxin learned he would be dealing with an emperor, he was startled despite having expected it. This was the first time he'd met a head of state. "Piece of cake," he said with a grin, scratching his head. "But someone will need to direct me." "I can train him," Zhao Su answered readily. "I'll make sure he has the knowledge before the satellite goes up." Huijian watched them, and perhaps out of curiosity more than anything else, nodded. "That sounds fine," Zhao Shu said. Since Jiangju had recommended him, Zhao Su trusted it would work out. "All right, let's do it," Jiangju said. "Sort out the payment and the details among yourselves. I have other matters to check." He stood and opened the door to let in whoever was waiting outside. Natasha walked in as soon as the door opened. She gave a half smile that could easily be misread. "I thought you might turn me away," she said. "If I wanted to, you wouldn't have found the tavern," Jiangju replied. "What commission brings you here this time?" Natasha glanced at Jiangju, then at the others. "You still care about Tony, I presume." She lowered her voice. "His situation is bad. His arc reactor was rebuilt by Ivan Vanko from Russia." "That means?" Jiangju's voice tightened. "That means the iron suit isn't Tony's exclusive property anymore." Natasha shrugged. "The military has influence with people in the White House and in Congress. They're preparing to hire Ivan Vanko as a weapons expert to develop armored weapons for them. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s investigation marks Vanko as dangerous. He might be joining the military to get revenge. His father, Anton Vanko, was disgraced and expelled because of Howard Stark." "So Tony's in danger," Jiang said. "He is, and Tony's arrogant and suspicious of S.H.I.E.L.D., so we can't protect him in the usual overt ways. We need outside help." Natasha looked at Jiangju for emphasis. "And there's an extra requirement. The operative must be human." Jiangju paused for a beat, then gave a small smile. "Then I know exactly who to call." He tapped the tattoo at the boundary gate, sending word to someone he thought perfect for the job. "He's the natural counter to armored suits and robots, so no need to assign anyone else." "You realize I said human, right?" Natasha pressed. "The world isn't ready to have its views overturned. People panic when things change." "He is human," Jiangju said softly. "But you know how fearful people can be. Those with strange abilities are often treated as monsters. They've had to endure a hard path. The process that made him strong wasn't gentle." He shrugged. "So don't make the mistake of testing him. He's not particularly warm toward humans." Natasha fell silent, reluctant but without better options. If Jiangju thought this would work, she would take it back to her superiors. She had to trust that whatever protections the tavern's contracts offered would prevent reckless attacks. Those agreements could bind and protect people from other worlds, though they could also be used against someone who assaulted the contract holder. Magneto arrived shortly afterward. Jiangju handed Natasha a glass of wine as the man in his classic attire stepped through the world-traveling gate. He accepted the cup, sipped, and looked better than the old rumors suggested. "Boss," he said with a small, genuine smile, "it's been a while." Time moved differently between worlds. The tavern's link was tied to whoever entered. So although Magneto had been there only a few days ago in the tavern's frame, 2 or 3 months had passed in his own world. This mission won't bother me, he added when Zhangju introduced Natasha. How long do you think it will take? Probably a week, maybe longer, Zhangju answered. That's fine. Magneto's tone was calm. The Brotherhood has fully withdrawn from the United States. We've reached an agreement with China. I'm living there now. Zhangju blinked. China? Magneto nodded. I studied their history. They endured brutal wars and still managed to defend themselves and rebuild. They are both tolerant and strong. I don't think they will persecute mutants, and frankly, I'm tired of fighting. Zhangju hesitated, then said, I'm sorry to pull you into this. If you don't want to. No. Magneto smiled. My life has changed here. The tavern is part of it. I don't want to be a soldier anymore, but I can still step outside when needed. He glanced at Natasha. Tell me what you need done. Chapter 10. Magneto and Tony Natasha walked Magneto out of the tavern and brought him to a safe house in New York. Once he was secure, she called Nick Fury and gave him a rundown, along with her suspicions. You mean he cares about Tony that much? Fury asked after a moment's thought. Yes, except for the time we approached him. Everything else seems tied to Tony. We even noticed that tavern because of Tony, Natasha said lightly. That makes sense, Fury replied. So this time we have to make Tony foolproof. Some people in the military and on the Hill have been acting strange. Just in case, take your man directly to Tony's house and tell him he's a guest from the tavern. Tony won't refuse. Understood. Natasha hesitated, then added, Nick, don't you think we're getting a little dependent on that pub? Natasha, you have to understand, humans like to believe in something. They pray to gods or luck or a place that keeps them safe. Iswar, Fury said calmly. Natasha ended the call with a head full of black threads. She didn't believe Fury's platitudes. Fury, the master of secrets, had never relied on gods. He believed in contingency plans and himself. More urgently, Natasha worried about Tony. Ivan Vanke was an extremist, unstable in ways she couldn't predict. She didn't know what he had planned in the dark. She booked a flight and flew out herself. At the safe house, Magneto was sitting quietly watching the news, oddly relaxed. Miss Romanoff? He asked. Mr. Magneto, she said. We need to move. Tony's in a worse position than we thought. All right. Magneto smiled. I promised to look after that little man. We can leave whenever you're ready. While they were waiting for transport, Natasha picked up more pieces of Magneto's recent arrangements. He'd secured Chinese citizenship for Brotherhood members without criminal records. The Chinese government had moved quickly on it. Those with records were organized into covert teams to operate in the United States and other affected countries, rescuing comrades where they could. China had resettled mutants into a small city, an area where they didn't have to hide their identities or live in fear. They could use their abilities if they wanted, find work, and support themselves without being shunned. Magneto had kept his promise to let some of his people live openly. He spoke about it with a quiet, steady confidence, and with a wry grin about his tavern full of strange liquors, his backup plan for getting by until things got better. Natasha tried to interrogate him for more details, but Magneto remained impenetrable. He'd been a formidable agent once, and he still kept his cards close. You hear that? Magneto stood just as she was about to press him again. Natasha hadn't heard anything. Then, 5 or 6 minutes later, the unmistakable thump of rotors reached them. She'd realized the moment the air shifted. His ability to manipulate magnetic fields made him attuned to aircraft. They boarded a helicopter that, to Magneto's amusement, landed directly on the back of a much larger transport plane. The helicopter recessed into the transport, and the plane shot forward at incredible speed, faster than many fighters. For S.H.I.E.L.D., it was garden-variety high-tech. By dawn, they were over Los Angeles. Another helicopter took them onto a coastal road in Malibu and pulled up to a familiar cliffside property. That's a nice place, Magneto said, looking at Tony Stark's mansion. I might have to build one when I get back. You'll have to earn more money, old man, came a teasing voice. Tony walked out onto the terrace in casual clothes and glanced them over. Also, you're fired. Natasha didn't blink. She'd been officially employed by Pepper Potts, not by Tony's temperament. Tony, you're in danger. We need to help. I don't need help. I can handle myself, Tony said, then added in an irritated tone, This is my private property. Miss Romanoff, you should leave. And you, he turned to Magneto, If I'm not mistaken, you were the fellow in the pub. Yes, we met once, when you were wearing that bulky suit, Magneto said with a smile. Tony shook Magneto's hand. So what's the fee this time? How much did S.H.I.E.L.D. pay? That's classified, Magneto replied with a mischievous look. Do you have a problem with them? No, Tony said, shrugging. It's just, you notice how there always seem to be flies buzzing around you? Little annoyances. It gets old. He glanced back at Natasha, who hadn't yet left, and added in a mockingly formal tone, Do you still want me to make you tea, Miss Romanoff? Your personality is unbearable, Mr. Stark, Natasha said evenly. If I were you, I'd try to rein it in. I'm here because Pepper asked me to protect you. I'll solve the problem, and then we might never meet again. Tony didn't press. After Natasha left, he steered Magneto toward the entry. He felt awkward about throwing out a guest, especially one he'd met in a tavern, and, besides, he had no idea what Magneto might be capable of if he tried. So you're in a bind? Magneto asked once they were seated, genuinely curious. Natasha hadn't given many details, only that protecting Tony was urgent and shouldn't take long. Probably, Tony said. I'd love to say people are overreacting, but it's worse. They're being pushed into desperation. The problem is, they don't know how to fight back, at least not right now, because there hasn't been an attack to respond to. Perhaps you should tell me everything that's happened, Magneto said, smiling. I think I'm better at thinking like a villain. Chapter 12. The Tangled Little Reindeer. The tavern was open as usual, but Jiangju didn't feel like brewing today. Maybe it was the arrival of autumn. He always felt sleepier this time of year and couldn't be bothered to move. Luckily, customers could still buy from his existing stock. There were no drinking limits in his place. As long as you had money, you could drink. Of course, the effects of certain specialty liquors faded with repeated use. A vitality wine might restore years the first time you drank it, but if you kept drinking it, the body adapted. The effect would drop to months, then weeks, then days, and eventually only a few extra hours. People developed antibodies. Otherwise, you could theoretically live forever, and there's no such easy miracle in this world. Besides, different races responded differently. The long-lived ones felt less from some brews, and some liquors that granted centuries of vigor to one race would probably kill a human. Everything in the tavern ran according to Jiangju's rules and arrangements, so unless something unexpected happened, he didn't have to worry much. He'd spent the day dozing. Dong dong dong. Xiaohei tapped the table and watched Jiangju sleep with growing concern. Lately, Jiangju fell asleep at the drop of a hat. Xiaohei was starting to worry something was wrong. Hey, wake up! Jiangju, Jiangju. Xiaohei shook him. Huh, it's you. What's the matter? Jiangju yawned and blinked awake. I just nodded off. You've been sleeping all day. Xiaohei's voice threaded with worry. Are you sick? Do I look sick? Jiangju regarded him with mock affront, then softened at Xiaohei's concern and smiled. It's probably the autumn drowsiness. Don't use that to stall me, you little liar, Xiaohei scolded, indignant. All right. Jiangju stretched and explained. You said a lot of people suggested adding new features to the tavern, remember? I've been dealing with that. Upgrades, a screening system, a queuing mechanism, a forum, even a shop. I need to set it all up properly so the functions don't conflict. That's why I've been a bit zonked. With your energy, you still get sleepy? Xiaohei blinked. Please. There's more than one thing to upgrade this time, Jiangju went on, slightly annoyed. If I don't sort them, the systems will clash and the whole place will be a mess. Then don't scare me like that. Xiaohei hopped up onto Jiangju's shoulder and rubbed his head. You're not that fragile. Ouch. What are you doing? Acting all clingy. Jiangju laughed as he let Xiaohei fuss. Don't worry, I'm not sick. If anything's up, just ask me. Shh, who said I was worried? Xiaohei snorted, jumped down, and vanished into the air with a puff. Jiangju watched him go and grinned. Xiaohei had, as usual, tidied the place after the last customers left. He turned on the TV and checked on Tony. Tony and Magneto were getting along. Jiangju felt relieved. He nearly choked on his drink when he saw the book in Magneto's hand. When we meet next, should we call him Comrade Eric? He mused, amused. He'd been a party member once too, long ago. Now that memory made him a little sentimental. A knock sounded at the door. Jiangju already knew who it was, but was surprised the fellow had actually come to New York in person. "Come in. The door's unlocked," he called, turning off the TV. "Good evening, Boss Jiang." Loki pushed through the door in a black suit with his windbreaker slung over one shoulder. "Sit down. What brings you here so late?" Jiangju asked. "Father God demoted my stupid brother to the mortal world," Loki replied, taking a seat. "I came to see him and to say hello to you, boss." "Your brother is certainly easy to fool," Jiangju said with a shrug. "He's always letting you play games with him." He poured a glass of wine. "Want anything to drink?" "No, thank you," Loki declined. "What I want to ask is, does the boss know what Odin's thinking?" "I'm not certain. I'm not your father," Jiangju said, tasting the wine. "But Odin saved you because when he touched you, something in you changed. Your skin showed signs of Asgardian kin. He probably thought he'd found a way to understand the frost giant Asgard conflict more fully. So he should have made me king of Asgard, or at least given me a real chance," Loki said, excitement and frustration mixed in his voice. "I remember him saying both my brother and I had the qualifications to be kings. He seemed to mean more than just Asgard." Jiangju set the glass down and looked at him. "Maybe he did mean more, but I think it's too soon for you to be king of Asgard. Your background will limit how far you can go." "You mean they wouldn't accept me?" Loki asked, a smile that was half hope, half skepticism on his face. "Maybe," Jiangju said. "Look at Asgard now. They've lived in a long period of enforced stability, and many have forgotten how to fight. Odin himself feared a war. He was worried Thor might provoke one, and that fear shaped everything he did. He sealed away dangerous elements, rewrote history, eliminated rebels, and constructed an Asgard that protects but doesn't prepare. The result is a generation that, apart from people like Thor, is largely weak." "He's afraid of losing control," Loki said softly. "But maybe I could be the one to rouse Asgard, shake them awake. As the god of trickery, you might be better at stirring things up than anyone else," Jiangju replied. "Good luck with that." He smiled. "By the way, you're the first guest of the tavern from your realm. If there's any way I can help, say the word." "That's generous." Loki returned the smile, then rose. "For now, I have mischief to attend to with my cute brother." He looked almost wistful. He was handsome in his way, even if no one seemed to properly appreciate it. Jiangju hesitated as Loki reached the door. "Tell me, when Odin fell in front of you, did you ever consider killing him?" he asked suddenly. Loki paused, the answer hiding behind his practiced indifference. "Who knows?" he said lightly, and slipped out into the night. Chapter 13. The Ideological Gap. Magneto sat in one of Tony Stark's sunlit sitting rooms, a book open on his lap. A leather notebook lay in front of him, and a pen levitated a few inches above the page, its nib tracing neat lines as if guided by an invisible hand. When Tony emerged from his lab and saw the scene, he paused in the doorway with a grin. "You actually reading something useful for once?" Tony asked, curiosity and amusement fighting for the upper hand. Magneto looked up and smiled thinly. "It's given me a lot to think about, in particular, why I failed to unite more mutants. If you don't know, imagine mutants as a group of people born with extraordinary abilities. I once tried to lead them." "And you failed," Tony supplied. "Indeed," Magneto said with a shrug, "if you insist on calling me a failed leader." Tony dropped onto the sofa opposite him. "So tell me then. I'm curious." He leaned forward. Magneto closed the book a little and sipped his coffee. "If you are willing to listen to an old man's nagging," he said with the faintest amusement, "it begins with the difference between humans and mutants." He spoke at length, of his awakening in the shadow of his mother's death in Germany, of the long, bitter road that followed, of meeting Charles Xavier, and of their divergent choices. Tony raised an eyebrow. "Can Professor X really read minds? He doesn't seem like someone who gets inside people." "He is not a simple telepath who merely peers into heads," Magneto said. "Charles always saw things from the perspective of humanity. His origins and his instincts made him inclined to reconcile, to protect mutants by working within human systems, by limiting us to institutions like the Academy. He thought control and compromise would keep mutants safe, but every compromise he made gave humans opportunities to harm us again." Magneto's voice went softer. "Before I read this book, I never understood why Charles couldn't see me. Now I do. We were never the same people. Our experiences, our starting points, our fears, they are different. How could we have understood each other fully? Tony glanced at the book in Magneto's hands. The cover read On Protracted War. That book that good? He asked. It has value, Magneto said. Some of its lessons translate. Not everything will map cleanly. Countries differ, and you come from a different background, but you might benefit from it. Tony waved a hand toward the ceiling where Jarvis's interface answered them. Jarvis, make a note. Remind me to read that when I have time. As you wish, sir, replied Jarvis in his polite tone. I have several translations available and can provide them on request. Magneto smiled. A helpful butler. Tony grinned. Let's just say Jarvis is improving. He's got some way to go. Remember that Red Queen and Skynet I mentioned from the tavern? Those AIs were something else, but I'll keep working on Jarvis. Magneto watched him with a faintly puzzled expression, the sense that Tony had just set some verbal flag he didn't quite understand. He pushed the thought aside, raising his cup for a sip. Then Jarvis's voice interrupted. Sir, agents from S.H.I.E.L.D. have arrived. Director Nick Fury is here in person. Tony's smile faded a touch. Fury? Here? Open the door. Jarvis complied. A few minutes later, Nick Fury filled the doorway in his usual no-nonsense way. He carried a couple of weathered boxes under one arm and wore the tired, wary look of a man who had seen too many things for his own good. What's in the boxes? Tony asked with a trace of sarcasm. You bringing my stuff back because you're worried I'll never give it back? These belonged to you originally, Fury said flatly. We're returning them to their owners. There's also some information your father left behind you might want to look at. Tony let out an incredulous snort. If I'm not wrong, you've all studied them to death and gained nothing? Fury didn't bother denying it. We had the right to examine them. We did, but you're right. We got nothing useful. Tony flicked his eyes to the boxes and then back to Fury. He opened one to find odd souvenirs and some old film reels. Fury didn't linger on pleasantries. He wasn't here for Tony's barbs. He had another motive, to court favor with a mutant whose power could tip a balance. But when he glanced at the book in Magneto's hand, his carefully arranged plan faltered. The title had implications. Fury had assumed Magneto would be an American accent in mutant form, a man who could be swayed by appeals to shared American values. Seeing the book, he realized he'd misread the situation. He stepped forward and extended a hand without changing his tone. Mr. Magneto, Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Magneto set his book aside and accepted the gesture. I know who you are. There was a pause. Fury decided to probe. Which country are you from, if you don't mind my asking? Magneto lifted his cup and looked at Fury carefully. I recently became a Chinese national. I used to be German. Fury blinked. The intelligence Natasha had given him didn't match that at all. Right. Well, that's unexpected. Natasha's intel must be out of date. Magneto smiled slightly, not unkind. China is a very interesting country. I've even applied to join the party. One must keep studying. Fury's face tightened. He had been expecting a different kind of conversation, perhaps favors, technical exchange, machine tools, high-precision instruments. So you're asking for entry to the party. Equipment? Tech? Magneto shook his head. Consciousness is the requirement for joining a party, not tools. The things I brought are my gift to China. I have already spoken with them. His tone was factual, almost clinical. The United States and China are different. Fury felt like he'd slipped into a conversation on two different frequencies. He was used to negotiating and positioning, but this was outside his playbook. He could not parse Magneto's motives, and the interpreter in his head, spies, alliances, leverage, kept stuttering. Well, he said finally, with forced civility, good luck on that. I have other matters to attend to. I'll leave Tony in Mr. Magneto's care for now. It was an awkward attempt at a courteous exit. Without waiting for a response, Fury turned and walked away, leaving the boxes by the doorway. Tony watched him go, then looked back at Magneto. You just volunteered to babysit me? Magneto's grin was dry. You should be thankful. Most people build walls around you. I find walls can be useful. He nodded toward the boxes. And your father's things? I have returned what belonged to you. Tony opened his mouth to retort and then closed it. Fury's departure left a strange silence in the house. One of those silences that suggests uneasy alliances and conversations that have yet to be had. Magneto picked his book back up, pen hovering over the notebook, and resumed his reading as if nothing had happened. Tony sank back, more thoughtful than he would admit. Around them, sunlight slanted over the ocean, and the steady hum of Stark technology continued as usual. Physics and politics, side by side, each unreadable to the other. Chapter 14. Next stop, Konoha. Jiangju woke up, ate a quick breakfast, and was just about to go downstairs when his calendar pinged. A reminder popped up. Orochimaru's wedding was tomorrow. He didn't waste a second. He sprinted over to Xiaohei's place and banged on the door to wake him. "Damn it, Jiangju, I just went to bed," Xiaohei grumbled, rubbing his eyes and mumbling as he stumbled out. Jiangju only smiled. "Today we're leaving for Konoha. If you don't hurry up, I'll go without you." Xiaohei yawned wide. "Orochimaru's wedding is tomorrow? I haven't even got him a gift yet." "You should have prepared it already," Jiangju said nonchalantly. That finally pried Xiaohei fully awake. He bolted out of bed, muttering about gifts, slammed through the bathroom to get ready, and still hadn't bothered with breakfast. Seeing Jiangju calmly sipping a glass of wine in the hall only made him more exasperated. "If you've got time, why are you rushing me? Just wait a bit and I'll get the gift," Xiaohei complained, a touch melodramatic. Jiangju only winked, refusing to give anything away. He set a cup down for himself and quietly sent word to the other guests. "Wait for us and don't make any fuss. Not everyone would appreciate a grand entrance, after all." Dr. Ali and Conan were the first to show up after that. They greeted Jiangju and sat down. "Grab a chair," Jiangju said. "We're a little early. Have you had breakfast?" "I already ate," Conan replied, listless. "I didn't want to go to school, so I came here with Dr. Ali." Jiangju gave Conan a curious look. "What's wrong?" Dr. Ali smiled and explained. "Conan's been after a particularly slippery opponent. He lost him a few times and is still stewing over it." "Who could possibly give Conan trouble?" Jiangju asked, amused. Conan's eyes flashed with determination. "Just wait. I'll catch Kaito Kid next time." "That explains it," Jiangju said, nodding. Kaito Kid, the world-famous phantom thief and master of disguise, was the sort of opponent who would leave even a detective like Conan frustrated. "Boss, you know him?" Conan blurted, suddenly deferential. "I keep forgetting. You're basically a god compared to me." "Want me to tell you Kaito Kid's real name?" Jiangju asked with a sly grin. "No, I have to catch him myself. I am Detective Conan," Conan answered firmly. "Ambitious," Jiangju said with a chuckle. "Suit yourself." Conan lit up again with confidence, promising to reveal Kid's identity to the world. Dr. Ali glanced at Jiangju gratefully when Conan brightened. Jiangju smiled and said nothing. He knew Conan would recover his momentum on his own. The only real hurdle was that Kaito Kid wasn't easy to expose. Conversation flowed easily until Xiongba strode in. He was dressed in a sleek, long-distance running suit, black with gold patterns, and carried himself with an unmistakable air of authority. Even smiling, he radiated a quiet, dominant presence that made Dr. Ali and Conan fall silent for a moment. "Ha ha, Boss Jiang. Hope I'm not late," Xiongba said as he took a seat across from Jiangju. "Not at all. It's early. I didn't expect you to come so soon," Jiangju replied, gesturing politely. Lately, Xiongba explained, the Tianxiahui had stopped expanding. Many governing affairs were handed over to dedicated officials, which had freed him up. "I finally have time," he said simply. "So you've willingly paused your expansion. You're confident in the future," Jiangju observed, raising his glass. "Thanks for the reminder," Xiongba said with feeling. "I almost let the prophecies of Ni Bodhisattva bind me. I relied too much on Bu Jingyun and Ni Feng and thought I could conquer everything. But no one can decide a person's fate for them. Heaven may decree, but man still chooses the outcome. We make our own future." Jiangju nodded and raised his glass. "Heaven may decide, but man determines. Win against heaven." Xiongba allowed himself a small, satisfied nod. For a while he'd followed the clairvoyant authority without question. Now he'd learned to shape his own destiny. As the rest of their friends drifted in, the group's energy rose. When Rust, the errand god of Skyrim, oddly enough, finally arrived, Jiangju checked the time. It was nearly noon, perfect for setting off. They were heading to Konoha, and for many of them, that meant one thing: trying the legendary Ichiraku ramen. "All right, now that everyone's here, let's go," Jiangju announced with a faint smile. "Where's Senior Xiaohei?" Conan asked, looking around. Wait! Here! Xiaohei popped up from thin air, leapt onto Jiangju's shoulder, and clung there. Don't leave me behind. The rest greeted Xiaohei warmly. Jiangju reached up, pinched Xiaohei's chin like one might a small, disgruntled kitten, and smoothed his fur. Then he led everyone to the boundary gate. They stepped through and emerged onto a forest trail where the air felt unusually fresh. Dr. Ali breathed in deeply, smiling. The air here is wonderful. Not just the air, Rust added. There's an abundance of natural energy, too. Gandalf, who had been observing, shook his head. This planet is crying, he murmured. It feels like its energy was drained in one way and returned another. There's something odd going on. Jiangju waved a hand, filing the mysteries away for later. Let's save that for another time. Up ahead is Konoha Village, the home of the 5 great shinobi nations and Orochimaru's hometown. Orochimaru's waiting for us at the gate, so let's move. Chapter 15. Sarutobi Hiruzen's Worries. Although the Hokage Tower wasn't the tallest building in Konoha, it was impossible to miss. Together with the faces carved into the Hokage rock, it marked the village's skyline and served as the political heart of Konoha. 2 nights before Orochimaru's wedding, the lights in the Hokage building were still burning. Managing a ninja village was not a task that stopped at sunset. Inside the office, Sarutobi Hiruzen, wearing his Hokage robes, was still at work when the door opened. A middle-aged man with his right arm and part of his head bandaged stepped in and dropped into the chair opposite the Hokage with the kind of casual familiarity only old comrades shared. "Come on, Danzo," Hiruzen said with a tired half-smile. "I'm the Hokage. You can't stroll in here and ruin my dignity like that." Danzo Shimura didn't smile. "This isn't playtime, Hiruzen. I've come about tomorrow's wedding." Hiruzen stiffened, the weight of duty quickening his brow. Tsunade and Orochimaru's marriage has been approved by Mito-sama and the daimyo. There's no question of canceling it. "It's not the marriage I worry about," Danzo said quietly. "It's the people behind Orochimaru. There's no trace of them, no records, no affiliations. It's as if they don't exist." Hiruzen lit his pipe and let the smoke drift out slowly. "Orochimaru said he invited some friends from outside the village. I suppose it's possible he intends to stage something tomorrow." Danzo's mouth tightened. Orochimaru's recent prominence is troubling. New agricultural techniques, higher yield crops, advanced ninjutsu, chakra prosthetics that could return disabled shinobi to the battlefield. If he keeps pushing like this, it could destabilize things. Hiruzen's face grew complicated. "All those things have benefited Konoha. I can't simply oppose them." He paused, looking older than his years. "But Orochimaru is secretive. Experiments of unknown origin, disappearances. He frequently goes off without telling anyone. I can't help feeling he's hiding something." "Then we act discreetly tomorrow," Hiruzen said. "If we're discovered, I won't acknowledge it. There must be no incident at that wedding. Konoha's honor is at stake." "As you wish, Hokage," Danzo replied. He stood, bowed, and left. Once his back was turned, the expression on his face hardened. Danzo knew the situation was delicate, and that following Hiruzen's orders brought him closer to the center of power, the only path by which he might one day take the position of Hokage himself. He would do what he must for Konoha, and for his own ambitions. Hiruzen remained by the window after Danzo's departure, staring at the 3 faces carved on the Hokage rock. He valued Orochimaru as an able shinobi and as his former student, but he did not understand him anymore. He didn't know that Orochimaru now had Tsunade's backing, that he had the influence of the Senju clan and the support of the Fire Country's daimyo, or that he was gently pushing policies and innovations that were beginning to touch every corner of the village. The uncertainty nagged at the 3rd Hokage. "What are you planning, Orochimaru?" he wondered aloud. The next day at noon, an Anbu operative reported to the Hokage. Orochimaru had personally gone to the main gate to meet several visitors. He was moving through the village like a guest enjoying the sights, as if visiting Konoha for the first time. Hiruzen instructed the Anbu to keep the newcomers under observation, and, curious, reached for his crystal ball to get a clearer look. He used the telescope technique to peer through the globe, but before he could focus, the crystal ball exploded in a flash of white light that nearly blinded him. The globe shattered across the desk. "What in the world?" Hiruzen clapped a hand to his face, stunned. Several Ambu hidden in the office burst out from the shadows at the sound. Hokage-sama! I'm all right, Hiruzen said, blowing at his eyes. He steadied himself and gave orders with calm authority. Notify Danzo and the advisors to come here at once. What about the daimyo and the nobles? One of the attendants asked. Several high-ranking guests were in the village for the wedding. With the daimyo and clan leaders already here, I don't expect anything to happen. Keep them under cover for now, Hiruzen replied, and continue monitoring those visitors. The Ambu nodded and dispersed in a blink, disappearing with teleportation techniques. Hiruzen lingered by the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching the streets of Konoha. From this vantage, he could see only the usual bustle, merchants, kids, and shinobi going about their day. There was nothing obviously wrong. Konoha looked as beautiful as ever. Outside the center of town, Orochimaru strolled through the shopping district with Jiangju and the others at his side. Civilians and shinobi bowed and greeted him warmly. Jiangju watched as people's faces lit up in genuine respect. Orochimaru's prestige in the village was apparent and well-earned. No wonder the Hokage was prying, Jiangju said with an impressed smile. So Orochimaru really does have that much influence. Orochimaru, I'm starving. Let's try the famous Ichiraku ramen. Xiaohei piped up from Jiangju's shoulder. Jiangju laughed. If we're going for ramen, try Otsutsuki Ichiraku's craftsmanship. Orochimaru raised an eyebrow. Otsutsuki Ichiraku. It's a joke, Jiangju said. Remember that illusion we saw? Xiaohei wondered if the ramen shop's owner was some powerful backer, so he joked and called him Otsutsuki Ichiraku. I get it, Orochimaru said with a faint smile. Let's go. Xiaohei could not contain his excitement. He leaped from Jiangju's shoulder and darted ahead. Wait, I know where it is. Don't run off. They hurried after him and arrived at the small ramen shop. The owner, Honda, was still relatively young, and a pretty assistant worked by his side. The place bustled, every table taken and a queue at the door. It's packed, Jiangju said, peering in. When he checked the prices, he understood why. We might not be able to eat here. Xiaohei's face fell. He had wanted to try it so badly. Not wanting to push others out mid-meal and still hungry, Orochimaru led the group away. They ended up at a barbecue restaurant where a private room had been reserved. Apparently, these guests had planned ahead. Inside the private room, the atmosphere was convivial. Orochimaru raised his cup. Thank you all for coming to my wedding. Let me toast to the occasion. Xiongba, one of the more boisterous guests, grinned and raised his cup in return. It's fate that brought us together here. To fate. They drank. Jiangju had supplied the wine, sparing no expense. His guests were used to stronger fare than ordinary tavern liquor. The food was good, vegetables and meat raised under the plentiful natural energy of this world, tasting richer than what Jiangju had known elsewhere. He ate with obvious pleasure. Xiaohei, unafraid of meat or vegetables, devoured his share with relish, thoroughly content. The mood in the room was light and friendly, at least for now. Chapter 16, Sandaimu and his friends. Jiangju and his group were having a great time, barbecue, laughter, and a few too many toasts. Of course, Conan didn't drink. He was still underage. Orochimaru, who had come with Dr. Eli, didn't exclude him. He knew Conan was a young man, not a child. Tsunade, as the bride, can't come out before tomorrow, so I'll drink this cup for her, Orochimaru said with a smile, clinking glasses with everyone. Thanks for inviting me, Hercules replied, lifting his large cup to meet Orochimaru's medium one. Otherwise, I'd be running around the world with my father, training demigods. That does sound interesting, Urahara Kisuke said with his characteristic grin. Conversation flowed easily. One toast followed another, and for the moment the idea of visiting Konoha village was forgotten. Konoha wouldn't run away. There was time for that later. Xiaohai, though, wasn't used to such noisy crowds. He slipped away to explore, explaining to Jiangju that he wanted to see how the world from the comics looked in reality. With his strength, safety wasn't something he needed to worry about. If anything, the people around him should be worried. Jiangju let him go. He enjoyed the lively scene, picked up a freshly roasted piece of meat, and savored it. Creatures and peoples shaped by natural energy were endlessly fascinating to him. While they ate and laughed at the barbecue restaurant, a very different meeting was happening inside the Hokage's office. The Konoha Advisory Council and the third Hokage had convened an emergency session. The discussion centered on Jiangju and his companions, especially after Sarutobi Hiruzen's spying technique had suffered immediate backlash the moment it was used. Whoever they were dealing with couldn't be ordinary. "I think we should call Orochimaru back for questioning," said a cold-faced man in a turtleneck and glasses. "Menyan," Danzo sneered. "Menyan, I'm disappointed you'd say that. Not everyone can reach Orochimaru now. As long as he's still technically a member of Konoha, he isn't untouchable," Mito Kodobu retorted. The third frowned. Menyan's words had been too pointed. No matter what motives Orochimaru hid, his recent contributions were considerable. For such a man to be spoken of this way made Hiruzen uneasy. Over the years, the old comrades had weakened, some dead, some wounded, some retired, and that had changed the balance of judgment among them. He suspected power and resentment were clouding better sense. "Don't forget," Hiruzen said, interrupting, "Orochimaru is admired across the land of fire. We can't start a fight and cause needless misunderstanding." He made a decision. "I'll have Ambu and patrols shadow them covertly. I want to know their movements as soon as possible." Koharu scowled. "Handling this so weakly will damage Konoha's reputation. Tomorrow's the wedding, a huge event for Konoha and the Land of Fire. If something happens then, neither the daimyo nor Mito-sama will be pleased." Danzo's tone tightened. He knew others on the council craved what they suspected in Orochimaru's labs, but none dared act openly now. Some were taking this chance to press their resentments, but neither he nor the Sandaime were fools. They wouldn't act rashly on the eve of such an important day. Attacking Orochimaru now would be a political disaster. Orochimaru's standing and the Senju Uzumaki ties made the consequences dangerous. The emergency meeting adjourned, without the Sandaime finding the clarity he'd hoped for. He had expected better counsel from his old friends. Instead, they seemed preoccupied with what they could take from Orochimaru. Hiruzen felt suddenly tired. "Danzo, what's the situation out there?" the third asked when Danzo returned to the office. "The people we selected have no ties to Konoha," Danzo replied calmly as he sat down. "Are they strong?" "I used the telescope technique," Hiruzen explained, taking a drag of his cigarette. "The ability rebounded the instant it completed. I wasn't injured, but the crystal ball shattered. That means either the opponent is extremely powerful or they wield a very strong countermeasure. I'd prefer the former." "Understood. We'll prepare for the worst," Danzo said without flinching. "By the way, some nearby nations have been acting up over profitable crops. I've already sent people to investigate." "I'm glad you're handling that," Hiruzen said, nodding slightly. "I've got news too. Tsunagakure and Ibukure are showing interest in the Land of Fire. The shadow of war is already appearing." Danzo snorted. "What are we afraid of? We'll deal with them when the time comes. I'm concerned about the forces behind Orochimaru and what he's hiding. He shouldn't be keeping certain things from us. Still, his contributions to the Land of Fire have been significant." Hiruzen forced a wry smile. "You should know, Danzo, I always thought I understood my 3 apprentices well. Lately, I'm not so sure." "Handle this. You're the Hokage," Danzo said with a sneer as he rose. "Tonight will be busy. You'll have your hands full." Then he left, confident in his arrangements and wary of the unknown power that had just struck back at Sarutobi's eyes in the night. Chapter 17. The 6 Paths of Voyeurism. In Konoha, at the residence of the Fire Country daimyo, the lord had just finished a string of banquets and was now listening to reports from his retainers. No daimyo wanted to surrender complete control of the ninja. Many of them still dreamed of using shinobi as tools of statecraft. Long ago, before Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara changed everything, that had been the way of the world. Lords directing independent shinobi to fight for territory and advantage. But Hashirama and Madara condensed those scattered forces into a new political organism, the village, and created a different balance of power. Hashirama did not wipe out the daimyo. Instead, he struck a bargain with them, a one-country, one-village system. The resulting peace ended the constant internecine conflict that had ravaged the lands. For a time, the arrangement worked, but Hashirama's reforms could not completely account for the ambitions and resentments that simmered beneath the surface. After his death, the world shifted again. War returned. and it became clear that some daimyos had quietly been scheming all along. If the ninjas ever enjoyed prolonged peace and prosperity, other social forces would rise, and that possibility terrified certain powerful families. "Can you find out who those people are?" the daimyo asked, leaning forward. "Investigations are underway," his retainer answered. "But we've discovered that others are looking into the same matter. There are rival parties asking questions about the same people." "Do your best," the daimyo said. "But tread carefully in Konoha." He sighed. Compared to Konoha's ninja, his authority in the village was thin. Recently, Orochimaru had demonstrated some remarkable agricultural breakthroughs: high-yield rice, hardy wheat, and improved vegetable strains, using verified seed stock. The daimyo hoped to cultivate a relationship with Orochimaru. Such talent could be useful. Besides, Tsunade's connections might also prove helpful. He had tried, through those links, to approach the snake-handed scientist, but every attempt had been frustrated. When he came to Konoha, the Hokage and his inner circle staged continuous banquets that kept visiting dignitaries entertained but strictly away from Orochimaru. Hiruzen Sarutobi, Danzo, and other influential figures had made it clear, overtly and covertly, that the daimyo was not to make contact. Once, when Hiruzen was young and first becoming Hokage, the daimyo had attempted to take advantage of the situation and exert influence over Konoha. He'd been discovered. Someone had even slipped a kunai into the daimyo's bedroom as a warning. The daimyo waved the matter off for now, but he remembered. Under the next generation, Konoha's independence had only strengthened until the village and the fire country no longer stood in a subordinate relationship, but in a cautious cooperation. Meanwhile, Hiruzen and the Hokage's office had quietly adjusted their precautions because of Orochimaru, Jiangju, and others slipping around the edges of official control. They moved frequently, staying out of the public eye. Jiangju, however, treated everything like a game. After enjoying a fine meal, he and his unusual entourage stopped visiting the village and took up residence in Orochimaru's relocated laboratory, the same place where Orochimaru now lived and where quarters had been set aside for Jiangju and his companions. Lust was summoned away by Tsunade's men, and Konan tried to sneak off with him, only to be intercepted by Jiangju. The boy was forever forgetting he wasn't an ordinary child. Gandalf, intrigued by the new world he found himself in, asked Orochimaru for books and spent his time in the living room reading. Lu Xiaofeng and Hercules, both energetic and restless, went out to stretch their legs, neither particularly fond of staying cooped up at home. In the laboratory building, Jiangju bounced about with his usual restless charm. "Come on, Conan, let's go play. These three are experiment-obsessed lunatics. When we get together, we'll have all sorts of fun. I could have gone with Rust to Sister Tsunade's place," Conan muttered. "Playing with you never ends well." "Humph, be careful or I'll tell Shallan about you," Jiangju teased. Conan's resistance evaporated. He knew Jiangju kept his word. All right, boss, play with me." "You're helpless." Jiangju grinned and then turned toward the open space of the living room. "Hey, old man who likes to peek, want to join us?" "Don't scare me. I'm afraid of ghosts," Conan complained, frowning as Jiangju's antics grew more theatrical. "Relax, kid. I think I've caught a big fish this time." With that, Jiangju teleported to a corner of the room and pulled a figure out of the air, an old man in flowing white robes, a black staff hovering behind him. He looked like something out of a myth, an elderly, oddly solemn man with wide, corrugated eyes. "Who are you?" the old man demanded, startled as he fixed those unusual eyes on Jiangju. "It doesn't matter who I am," Jiangju said breezily. "What matters is who you are. You're the majestic sage of the Six Paths, and I have to say, you've been copying that cantankerous old man, the third, and spying like him." The sage of the Six Paths bristled at the jibe. He would have preferred to answer with overwhelming power, summon thunder, unleash cosmic techniques, but something was wrong. Standing in this lab, in this world, he found his vast abilities strangely muted. As guardian of this world, he had been watching events from a distance, preventing his own mother from breaking the seal and stepping into reality. Then news had come. Many strangers had arrived. He moved to investigate and, to his surprise, traced them to Konoha, only to discover Jiangju had intercepted them first. Calming himself, The six-path sage regarded Jiangju. "Who are you, and what is your purpose in coming to this world?" he asked, voice even but cautious. "Don't worry," Jiangju said with a careless shrug. "We're just here to attend a wedding. As for who we are, there's no need for introductions. Whether we'll meet again is anyone's guess." The sage stared, incredulous. The expression on his face might as well have read, "Who do you think you're kidding?" That same evasive, self-important posturing, so like a trap the sage would expect from others, was being used on him. He hated being played with in his own domain. "Of course you don't believe me," Jiangju went on, suddenly theatrically solemn. "But even if I wanted to do something to this world, you don't have the strength to stop me." For a moment, the sage's composure faltered. He had the loneliness of a god who found he could not intervene as he wished. Facing an adversary he could not overcome left him quietly bereft. Then, Jiangju's grin returned. "So how about it? Let's play some video games and chat for a bit. You can't beat me anyway." Chapter 18. The Eve of the Wedding. The Sage of Six Paths had never met anyone so brazen. He'd come to talk, not to fight, so why did this fellow act like winning was optional? As the guardian of this world, he could summon the greatest warriors who had ever lived. There was no need to be trifled with. "So," the sage said with a smile, looking at Jiangju, "what is it you want to talk about?" "It's nothing much," Jiangju answered, casually folding away the compact ball of condensed energy in his hand. The warped air around him smoothed back to normal. "I was just wondering, if you can control life and death, why can't you control your two sons?" Conan watched the exchange with a mix of incredulity and relief. He had braced for a fight. Instead, the Sage of Six Paths looked almost put out. He seemed less like an unstoppable force and more like a bewildered elder. The sage's expression sobered. "Indra and Asura. I can't do anything about them. Even though their souls return to the Pure Land, their wills and chakra keep reincarnating in ways that defy the natural order. Even with control over the Pure Land, I can't stop it. You two are really a headache, even after you're gone." Jiangju's voice was calm. "You keep coming back and dragging war and calamity behind you." He glanced at the sage. "I once thought the rise of the ninja clans would bring peace and prosperity, but that's clearly not true. Since humanity first appeared, conflict has never ceased," the sage said, disappointed. "I don't blame you," Jiangju replied lightly, "but what I'm asking about are your two children." "Do you have some solution?" the sage asked, hope sparking. "No." Jiangju said it plainly. It wasn't that he lacked the means, he simply didn't want to get involved. The sage's face turned a shade paler. He had expected at least a proposal, not dismissal. "And you call yourself shameless," Jiangju added with mock exasperation, rolling his eyes. "Tell me, old man, have you been watching too much Bilibili?" "Bilibili?" The sage looked genuinely puzzled. "It's just a silly website. Never mind." Jiangju waved it off. "It's getting late. I'm going to bed. I won't walk you out." "You haven't even told me who you are," the sage said quietly. "You haven't introduced yourself either?" Jiangju straightened and glanced at Conan. "You two haven't?" "No." Conan shook his head, as if mildly reproaching Jiangju for toying with the veteran sage. "All right." Jiangju stood and smiled. "My name is Jiangju. I run a tavern. Whether you can come in depends on your luck." The sage still didn't quite believe him, but there was nothing more he could do. He left the room with his head full of questions and an unfamiliar, nagging sense of unease. He had never been bested in this way before. By then, Gandalf and Xiongba had returned as well, looking like they'd been in a fight. Conan immediately went to meet them. "I ran into a few ninjas in black, masked," Gandalf said, trying to appear light. "If I hadn't known some of their techniques, I might have taken more damage." "They weren't earth-shattering in strength," Xiongba added, settling on the couch. "But they had all sorts of uncanny skills and excelled at assassination. In my old life, I'd probably have died against people like them." "Black-clad, masked, sounds like Ambu," Jiangju said with a small smile. "Or at least a disguise someone used." "Orochimaru has changed things too much in this world," Jiangju continued. "Some of those changes even exceed the world's usual limits, and he's been sloppy about hiding them, so he's attracted attention." "Targeted?" Xiongba nodded. "I saw that on the road. Orochimaru's work has become famous even in this village. If I were someone with influence, I'd want the same. Not just the people here, Jiangju said, but the whole country, other countries, even other villages. Everyone hopes to inherit Orochimaru's achievements. Those who can't reach him directly will find someone behind him who can. Are the country and the ninja village the same thing? Conan asked, curious. Is a ninja village actually an independent state? A country is a country. A ninja village is a ninja village, Jiangju explained. The countries issue missions and offer rewards. The ninjas complete the missions and earn their living. It's a cooperative relationship. He noticed Xiangba's puzzled expression and smiled. The political system here is odd, especially if you come from the Central Plains. Yes, Xiangba said. For someone used to a unified state, this is strange. Even in Mr. Gandalf's world, things were different. Many of Japan's institutions were inspired by China, Conan chimed in, surprised. Isn't this system similar? We learned from China, but we didn't copy it entirely, Jiangju said with a shrug. It's been adapted to suit things here. At least it's better than Bangzi country in some ways. At that moment, Xiaohei burst in from outside, panting and cursing about something. Everyone looked up, instantly curious, especially Conan, ever the detective. He poured Xiaohei a cup of tea and asked what had happened. I was attacked, Xiaohei spat. I was just wandering around and thought I'd try Ichiraku ramen when it was quiet, but some guy came at me. He waved his paws dramatically. I sent them off, but when I finally got to Ichiraku, there was a line again. And, Conan pressed, it got worse. Xiaohei slammed a paw down and scowled. I was really determined to eat Ichiraku today, but when I ordered, the Naruto fish cake was gone. Ramen without Naruto is not Ichiraku ramen. The indignation was almost comical. You're so unlucky, Xiaohei, Jiangju laughed. It amused him. He, who could nudge luck one way or another, found his little companion complaining about misfortune. Chapter 19, Lively Night. Zhang Xiaohei was a little red panda. He didn't have the grand, legendary past of a giant panda. No stories of being an iron-eating beast or the Mount of Qiyu, but anyone who knew the Zhang family knew he wasn't merely cute. Unlike other red pandas who flipped enemies over with looks alone, Xiaohei controlled something as intangible as luck. In theory, that should mean he never had bad luck, unless his luck was used up. I just wanted to see if I was lucky, so I put my powers away, Xiaohei explained. You idiot. Jiangju glared at him. You can't just switch luck on and off like a toy. Misusing it ruins your own fortune. Who's unlucky now? Who? Enough about that. I took this from the one who attacked me. Looks like a ninja from Union Village, Xiaohei said, changing the subject. He produced a forehead protector and handed it to Jiangju. Tonight might not be safe, but I only plan to attend the wedding and leave. In that case, keep the trouble away, Jiangju said with a shrug. He picked up a scrap of paper from the nearby coffee table, doodled a few stick figures, and blew on it. The drawings fluttered like paper puppets and then sprang to life, tumbling off the page. Everyone in the room stared as the little paper figures snapped into formation and saluted Jiangju. You'll guard this building, Jiangju told them. If anyone approaches with malicious intent, send them away, and if you can, tie them up. At his gesture, 5 tiny black ropes coiled around the figures. Knock them out and bind them, he added, and the ropes tightened obediently. What are these? Conan asked. Just stick figures, as you can see. But don't underestimate them. Any one of them could be far stronger than all of you together, Jiangju said with a smile. They're soldiers of my design, a world before me, crafted by a powerful being. Everyone else could only sigh in amazement. Xiaohei, however, sent a private message to Jiangju. How could a programmer design something so strong? He'd seen similar animated characters in another world, and they weren't built for combat at all. Jiangju snorted and replied by message, You think you can design better? Remember, in my settings, I'm a super hacker-level existence. Xiaohei puffed up. Don't forget I do have hacking skills. Jiangju, curious, checked his phone and found that Xiaohei's profile did list hacking ability. He felt a little embarrassed. Well, that must be some setting someone joked up. It doesn't mean you're actually that powerful, he complained, not wanting to admit the other was formidable. After all, Xiaohei controlled luck, but had once been eaten when Naruto's scroll went missing. How could someone so hapless be truly powerful? Scoundrel! Idiot! The two ping-ponged messages back and forth until they forgot that. To everyone else, they simply looked like they were having a silent staring contest. The room's other occupants had already lowered their estimation of Jiangju accordingly. "What are they doing?" Conan whispered to Gandalf. "I'm not sure, but don't worry. Boss Jiang's like this sometimes. He gets these fits." "Xiaohei's lived with him long enough to catch it," Gandalf answered quietly. "That's the legendary sound transmission," Lu Xiaofeng added. "You can hear it, even if their voices are low." "Yes, I can hear it." Jiangju tossed a remark back. "Conan's a brat, but I didn't expect you to be such a jerk, Gandalf." "Hey, don't leave me out like that. Let me go." Conan protested. He made to run, and Jiangju scooped him up with one hand and waved him about like a freshly caught fish. The rest of the group burst into laughter. The mood lightened. They spent the next hour chatting on the sofa before retiring to their rooms. Orochimaru and the scientists, however, stayed holed up in the lab, apparently still poring over whatever they'd been studying. Inside, everyone slept soundly that night. The 5 paper guardians circled the building, and Jiangju had cast a soundproofing seal, so the chaos outside could not reach them. Outside, though, the night was anything but peaceful. Forces from various factions and local Fire Country troops clashed around Konoha. There were skirmishes in small pockets. And activity at the Hokage's office didn't stop. Lights burned late into the night, and security ninjas went in and out, reporting updates up the chain. If the crystal ball hadn't been broken, there would have been none of this scrambling. The third Hokage had relied on that crystal to observe Konoha. Without a spare, he couldn't continue the surveillance. It wasn't a simple tool. It needed a barrier-class chakra seal to pierce Konoha's protective ward. Without that, the screen showed only an impenetrable blur. "Haha, who knew so many people were interested in Orochimaru?" Danzo remarked, calm as ever. "We've invented a lot," the third Hokage said, lighting a cigarette. "If you don't care about what's going on, then you're a ghost." "You saw what happened at the research building," Danzo continued. "Those strange ones are extremely powerful. They didn't even seem to use ninjutsu." Danzo's arm bore traces of battle. He had engaged those paper-like opponents and evacuated when things went badly. One of the stick figure's arms had been severed and sealed, but it reconstituted itself by drawing moisture from the air. "They're stronger than we thought. Whatever they are, it's like a created technique," the third said, staring at the inked seal scroll on the table. Danzo's proof of slaying, the removed arm now sealed away. "Are we going to change our approach?" Danzo asked. "Why change?" The third Hokage exhaled a stream of smoke and relaxed into his chair. "Orochimaru's methods differ from ours on some points. Yes, but he's never outright harmed Konoha's interests. That's worth something." "Ah! Yuanfei, I suddenly understand why you were chosen," Danzo said with a rare chuckle. "You were made for politics." Chapter 20. The Wedding Begins. I don't know how everyone else slept that night, but Jiangju slept like a log. He wasn't used to beds, yet he slept so soundly that when Xiaohei nudged him awake the next morning, he woke up bewildered and angry. "What are you doing?" "I was sleeping perfectly," Jiangju grumbled without opening his eyes, clutching the quilt and a pillow. "You're still asleep? The wedding's already started," Xiaohei said, speechless. He'd already woken Jiangju once, left briefly, and come back to find him still in bed. "The wedding started?" Jiangju bolted upright, eyes wide. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Xiaohei frowned. He'd told him. What else could he say? But arguing with Jiangju was pointless. The man was shamelessly good at shirking blame. "If you don't hurry, you'll miss it," Xiaohei said coldly. "Miss it?" Jiangju snapped, then instantly used his magic to change into a uniform. In the next heartbeat, he was standing beside Xiongba with Xiaohei at his side. No one seemed to notice how he had arrived. Conan, wearing a blue suit and looking as deadpan as ever, raised an eyebrow. "You're late," he said flatly. "Dr. Urahara and Mr. Urahara stayed up all night and still made it on time. Why were you the only late one?" "It's better to arrive than not," Jiangju said with a grin, nodding toward Tsunade and Orochimaru. The two had just finished the formal ceremony in elaborate, Japanese-style attire, heavy makeup and ornate costumes that made them almost unrecognizable. It had been a strange mix of traditions, strong Japanese customs fused with some Western wedding conventions. Watching it made me want to laugh. After the traditional ceremony concluded, the bride and groom had left the banquet hall, only to return an hour later, she in a white dress, he in a suit, for the reception. This wedding was massive. It celebrated the union of two people with powerful ties, students of the Sandaime of Konoha and a princess of the Fire Country, so nobles and dignitaries packed the venue. The Sandaime and the Fire Country daimyo sat together at a table, talking and laughing as though nothing about the world was odd. Xiaohei, however, looked bored. "I was hoping for something a little more exciting," he muttered to Jiangju. "You always want chaos," Jiangju replied. "We came as guests. Don't ruin Orochimaru and Tsunade's wedding." "Maybe I'll step outside and find some trouble," Xiaohei said. Jiangju shot him a warning look. "Don't go using your magic. Someone will notice." The reception was the liveliest part of the day. Young ninjas danced and drank, while others strolled and chatted with wine in hand. A few wandered toward Uzumaki Mito's table but were blocked by guards. Ordinary guests weren't allowed to get too close. Sandaime and the daimyo watched everything with an amused air, but Jiangju, ever irreverent, picked up 2 glasses and sauntered across the room toward the 9-tailed Jinchuriki. Nobody seemed to care until Danzo, his head and one arm wrapped in bandages, stepped directly in Jiangju's path. "It's a strong illusion, if that's what you're doing," Danzo said calmly. "But isn't that a bit much?" Jiangju smiled. "It's not an illusion, they just don't notice me." He strolled past Danzo and, before the man could turn, materialized behind him. Danzo went pale. "You," Danzo started, but his protest was interrupted by Uzumaki Mito's steady voice. "Danzo, don't be rude, they are guests." Danzo bristled, but Mito was the first generation's wife and a formidable presence. Even with age altering her appearance, largely because she used chakra to restrain the Kyuubi, she carried herself with authority. She turned to Jiangju with a warm, slightly amused smile. "Welcome, Boss Jiang," she said. "Tsunade must have told you." Jiangju sat down opposite her, placing his quilt on the table as though it were nothing more than a prop. "Of course she did. I wouldn't miss this for the world," he replied. Mito chuckled softly. As someone who could read changes in a person, her senses honed by the legacy of Kagura's eyes, she had noticed the shift in those around her. "Thank you for saving Shengshu and helping him awaken Muden," she said, addressing the younger man with the odd mixture of gratitude and maternal concern. Her voice was gentle. "No need to thank me," Jiangju shrugged. "Shengshu had too much life left to be ended so soon. I came mainly for the wedding, and to see you. Think of you as my first favorite older woman." He said it with a grin, teasing but not unkind. Mito laughed, a sound as bright as ever. "You flatter an old woman." Jiangju flicked his wrist and a filled wine glass flashed into existence in front of Mito. "A toast, then. Here's to the new couple." For a second, Mito seemed surprised. Then she smiled and raised the glass. Before Sandaime or the others could react, she drained it and set the empty down with a satisfied look. It was easy to see why Hashirama had chosen her. Chapter 21. New Elements and Magneto's Power. Tony Stark had dragged Eric Landshare, Magneto, out to look at some of Howard Stark's relics. He'd insisted that one more pair of eyes might catch what he'd missed in his father's notes. Eric, already gray and temperamental about being put on the move, protested that he'd barely filled out his party membership form in life, let alone agree to excursions now, but he came anyway. Tony had wanted Pepper to join, but she couldn't leave the company. There weren't many people Tony trusted, not even Rhodey completely. With Eric, it was different. Jarvis was ordered to seal the villa from surveillance and eavesdroppers. They went through the remaining items Howard had left behind, a few usable gadgets and lots of fragmented documents about the arc reactor. Tony studied them carefully and felt a prick of suspicion. Nick Fury's account hadn't been the whole story. There were gaps, pieces missing from Howard's manuscripts. The thought of Fury's omissions left a bad taste in his mouth. After discarding the useless papers, Tony picked up a stack of film reels with a small written note for Tony. Eric watched the screen as images of Howard played out, sometimes serious, sometimes mischievous. "Your father was a piece of work," Eric said with a small smile. "To me, he's a stubborn old man, Tony replied without looking up. He was more absorbed in a battered notebook, full of half-finished ideas and equations. The films distracted him less than the hints and calculations in that book. On the tape, Howard was preparing a speech. He set aside his mask, sat beside a model displayed at a Stark Industries exhibition, and spoke directly into the camera. I have always believed that my most precious invention is you, Tony, my son. You are the controller of the future. Tony's face shifted with surprise. He'd never heard his father say anything like that aloud while Howard was alive. The expression that followed was complicated, part laugh, part hurt. Eric watched him closely. He really believed you could build miracles, Eric said quietly. Howard had confidence. Maybe that's our inheritance, Tony said with a crooked smile. He studied the model on the screen, then looked at Eric. We should go to the company. You found something? Eric asked. He hadn't read the notebook, only seen the model on tape. I think so. A clue, Tony said. I owe Pepper one. If she hadn't insisted on keeping that old thing, I might have thrown it out or donated it to some museum. Men and their new toys, Eric teased. Tony grinned, and they left the villa together. Unseen, someone was already watching them. They hadn't gone far when Jarvis's voice flagged a problem. Small icons blinked on the windshield HUD of Tony's sports car, fast approaching flying objects. Sir, Jarvis said, multiple incoming drones. Tony glanced in the rear view. What the? Who sends a welcome party like this? He sped up. A volley of missiles streaked toward them. Eric's eyes narrowed. You have a guest, Tony. Before Tony could reply, a missile veered in midair and slammed into the attacking drones, detonating them in a shower of metal. Other missiles changed course and tore into the small robots that had launched them, ripping several apart in mid-flight. Tony slammed on the brakes and gaped. What the hell? What are you? Eric's mouth quirked. I can control magnetic fields. I mentioned it before. Tony recovered quickly, a grin creasing his face despite the adrenaline. Right, occasional memory glitches. That must be it. He keyed Jarvis. Jarvis, scan the area, trace launch points, and patch me through to Nick Fury. Connected, sir, Jarvis replied. A face replaced the HUD overlays. Nick Fury, gruff and immediate. Tony, looks like trouble. Need help? Yes, Tony said. Where is Ivan Vanko? He's making threats, steel constructs, chasing me in broad daylight. I'm tired of being toyed with. Fury's single eye narrowed as he listened. The attack hadn't come out of nowhere. Tony's suspicion of missing documents, Howard's hidden messages, and a public attempt on his life were suddenly threads of the same ugly knot. Tony felt the familiar sting of anger more than fear. He wasn't used to being powerless in a fight, and he hated being surprised. Eric watched him, thoughtful. The world Tony moved in had different rules. For Eric, the battlefield was simpler: magnetism, metal, force. For Tony, it was intelligence, reputation, legacy. Whatever game Fury and Vanko were playing, it was getting personal. Keep an eye out, Eric said. If they try that again, I'll make sure they regret it. Do that, Tony said. He keyed the car into stealth mode and drove toward Stark Industries, the model, and whatever clue Howard had left behind, determined to get answers and to find Ivan Vanko before the next move came. Chapter 22, Can't Hold Back Conan's Halo. A grand wedding was underway at the Senju estate. Because Tsunade was regarded as a princess of the Land of Fire, the ceremony was being conducted with all the pomp and protocol that a prince's wedding required. The celebration would last several days, at least 5, so all of Konoha was alive with activity. Tension had built, though, from an unexpected quarter. The interactions between Jiangju and Uzumaki Mito had put the third Hokage and the elders on edge. They couldn't find any outward change in Mito, but the elders worried that something beyond their control might be taking place. The previous night they had gone to Mito's residence and waited. She refused to see them, claiming to be tired. That excuse rankled. They couldn't press Mito directly out of respect and tradition, so their attention shifted to Jiangju and his companions, but every attempt to approach them was stopped by a barrier Jiangju had set. No one could get through. There was talk of calling in Orochimaru, but his house, too, was sealed behind the same barrier. The elders could only watch helplessly and rage inwardly. This is an insult to Konoha, Homura Mitokado snapped, pacing. Danzo's expression was dark, but he kept his temper more controlled. The third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, studied the situation quietly. Don't let this escalate over someone we can't directly confront, Hiruzen said finally, rubbing his brow. There are already enough suspicious people circling the village. We can't let outsiders take advantage of the current situation. We can't just ignore Orochimaru either, Homura protested. Don't let your anger cloud your judgment, Koharu Utatane chided gently. The two elders had been sharp with one another for years, but when it came to the village's security, they could still focus on the bigger picture. Hiruzen, mindful of that, cut short their debate. Right now, we don't have enough manpower to chase every lead, he said. Danzo, you'll be responsible for security around visiting nobles and the daimyo. Be ready. Other lands will be watching the Uchiha and Hyuga closely. Danzo nodded curtly. I won't let anyone take advantage of the chaos, he said. Homura, Koharu, you two will deliver my written orders to the Uchiha and the Hyuga, Hiruzen continued. They will need to take extra precautions. And Monoyan, he glanced at another seasoned shinobi, you and Sakumo will be responsible for protecting the civilians. They're the bedrock of Konoha. Nothing must happen to them. Hiruzen's voice hardened with the weight of command. The village had grown since he first took office, and the role of Hokage by now required more than battlefield prowess. It required subtlety, alliances, and the ability to absorb power grabs without fracturing the village itself. He knew that many of the strong-willed figures around him had their own ambitions. As long as those ambitions didn't threaten his bottom line, he could live with them. Still, he would not allow the village to be compromised. With assignments made and men dispatched, the elders dispersed into the night. The ninja of Konoha were suddenly busy, out on patrols, setting wards, checking perimeters. To citizens, nothing seemed different the next morning. Everyday life on the streets continued uninterrupted. That was by design. Hiruzen did not want panic, nor did he want enemies to know how many of their movements the village had noticed. But in the courtyard where the daimyo of the Land of Fire was staying, calm erupted into horror. A shout, unnatural and amplified, as if a jutsu had been used to broadcast it, tore through the quiet. The daimyo is dead. People nearby, nobles and commoners alike, froze. Danzo, who had taken position outside the daimyo's quarters, went pale. He used a teleportation technique and materialized inside the courtyard to find servants collapsed in shock. Through the open sliding doors, he could see the daimyo himself, beheaded, lying in a pool of blood. Guards clustered around, stunned and horrified. Danzo felt rage like a cold flame. How did you fail to protect him? He barked at the head of the daimyo's protective detail, a bald monk who had been entrusted with the Lord's security. We didn't see anyone, the monk replied, face ashen. The daimyo was alive moments ago. I heard him speak. No one approached. We will notify His Highness and demand an explanation from Konoha. Danzo cut him off. He had been planning to take a personal role in the daimyo's protection, but the Lord's inner guards had insisted on their own measures. Now a killing had occurred inside a place presumed secure. Danzo would not let the matter slide. He activated his command, sealing the courtyard and summoning root operatives to control the scene. No one would leave. Everything would wait until Hiruzen arrived and made the judgment. Outside the courtyard, someone who had come to watch the commotion, a young investigator who had mixed intent for fun and business, smiled thinly at the unfolding scene. Jiangju, better known to some as Conan, had been present at a distance. He had watched the protective arrangements, the elders' concern, and the barriers, everything a detective would note. He had also sensed something else, a presence, an aura the color of death that slipped through defenses like a razor. He had attempted to dampen it, to contain it, but even he hadn't been able to fully suppress that lethal aura in time. I didn't expect even I couldn't hold it back, Conan muttered, voice low and edged with something like regret. Be careless, and you'll die. With that, he fell quiet and narrowed his eyes. A murder had been committed, right under the noses of Konoha's guardians, and Conan's detective instincts were already flickering to life. Chapter 23. The Ninja World Doesn't Need a Detective. Jiangju was asleep in his room when a suddenly amplified shout tore through the air, pulling him awake. Someone had used ninjutsu to broadcast the cry. Whatever it was, it sounded urgent. He rose and went out of Orochimaru's research institute, Conan already at his side, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Most of the others had either gone out for exercise or simply weren't interested, but Conan, the detective, couldn't ignore a public commotion. The curiosity switch flipped hard. He was already halfway out the door. Together they headed toward the courtyard across the way, where a daimyo had apparently died. "What's this? Going to be a bloody wedding or the fall of a distinguished figure?" Jiang Ju muttered. He sounded like he was half joking, half annoyed. "Am I supposed to be sensitive to death auras now, Conan?" Conan, however, had stopped paying attention to the theatrics. "Can we get in and take a look?" he asked. His eyes were bright. The prospect of a mystery had him on edge. Jiang Ju rolled his eyes. The gate had already been locked down. Ambu were everywhere, sealing off the area. "It's not easy to get in. They've surrounded the whole courtyard." Lu Xiaofeng stepped up beside them. He'd apparently already scouted the perimeter. "The third has gone into the courtyard," he said quietly. "The streets around here are under tight control." "A trap?" Conan asked, frowning. "No." Jiang Ju tugged a small wand from within his robe, tapped a flat stone, and it folded up into a seat. He sat. "The daimyo is definitely dead." Conan glanced at him, caught by the way Jiang Ju seemed unruffled. "You're being awfully loud about it," he complained. "Everything I do looks ostentatious to other people these days." Jiang Ju shrugged. "Besides, the third is about to come out. If you want to ask about the case, go ahead, but you won't solve it." "That's not true. No crime is perfect. People always leave clues." Conan sounded confident enough to believe it. "If you can still say that after this," Jiang Ju said calmly, "I'll help you get your original body back." Conan's head snapped up. "You mean it? When have I ever lied?" Jiang Ju replied without emphasis. Conan didn't hear the brush off. The idea of returning to his original body had him glowing. He was only starting to compose the questions he would ask when figures emerged from the cordoned courtyard. The third Hokage himself, and beside him a sullen-looking man whose head and one arm were wrapped in bandages. They pushed through the crowd and approached Jiang Ju and the others. The third glanced at them, recognition and steel in his eyes. "I didn't expect to meet you all under these circumstances," he said. After yesterday's events, it was already clear to him that Jiang Ju was the leader of this group. "We met yesterday, yes," Jiang Ju said lightly. "What happened? The daimyo's death across the way will make all of Orochimaru's efforts more difficult." There was a political truth to that. The death of a Fire Country daimyo would change the balance between the Land of Fire and Konoha, strain relations, and weaken both sides in the end. "We'll handle it," Danzo cut in, his voice hard. "I want to know where you and your people were yesterday." Jiang Ju smiled faintly. "Are you accusing us?" The third put a hand up to stay Danzo before he could press further. Then he turned to Conan. "May this child see the scene?" The Hokage watched the boy carefully. There was no visible chakra signature about him. His movements and the little unconsciously revealing tells suggested he wasn't a shinobi. Still, the third's curiosity was piqued. "He might be able to help find the killer," Jiang Ju said. "Even if finding the murderer now won't do Konoha much good, why not let him try?" The third hesitated. "This is an internal matter. I can't have outsiders interfering." He gave Jiang Ju a polite but firm shake of the head. "Please return." Conan didn't take no for an answer. "Please let me try. I'll find the murderer," he pleaded. Danzo scoffed. "We have no need of a detective. It won't change anything." "Change nothing?" Conan shot back. "Aren't you at least curious who did it? Don't the daimyo's family deserve an explanation?" Orochimaru had been listening from the edge of the crowd. He stepped forward with an almost serene smile and addressed Conan in a calm, explanatory tone. "You have to understand the shinobi world, child. The third knows who he suspects, but that knowledge may not be useful to Konoha. There are countless ways for someone to be manipulated into committing murder. Sometimes the person pulled into the dirt isn't the main player, they are just the pawn." Conan's brow knitted. "What do you mean?" "People will take an incident and twist it to serve their own goals," Orochimaru continued. "Even if the sacrificed person is the official head of state, it only matters inasmuch as others can exploit it." Jiang Ju reached out and patted Conan's shoulder. "There are only interests between nations," he said flatly. "There's no simple justice or evil in those dealings. That applies equally to major countries and to the great villages of the shinobi world." Chapter 24. Return. The wedding ended abruptly. A daimyo of the Land of Fire had been murdered, and it was plainly no time for celebration. Tsunade and Orochimaru's ceremony had been cut short. Fortunately, they were already legally married, and the formalities were mostly finished. The remaining days were supposed to be little more than public displays of Tsunade's new status, but that meant little now. Tsunade was furious. Word spread that she'd punched a towering tree in the Senju compound that morning. Orochimaru, too, wore a dark expression. A daimyo had died on his wedding day, and that weighed on him. Orochimaru had come partly to escort Jiangju and his companions away. He knew his teacher had been keeping an eye on them, and this incident would inevitably be a thorny problem for the third Hokage and his advisors. The question now was how to turn this disaster into the least damage for Konoha. Danzo, ever suspicious and controlling, glared at Orochimaru. "They can't leave yet. There are things we still need to ask." As Hiruzen's old comrade and head of the route, Danzo and the third Hokage had a grudging understanding. In Konoha's politics, Danzo usually played the hard, ruthless role, while the third Hokage appeared the wise, compassionate leader. Orochimaru stepped forward. "In the name of the Senju clan and myself, I can guarantee these people had nothing to do with the daimyo's death. Mito-sama told me so." Orochimaru hadn't meant to tell Hiruzen about the tavern at first. He'd been reluctant, still influenced by his own private image of Hiruzen from Jiangju's Genjutsu world, and didn't want to drag the third into something so strange. But when Uzumaki Mito reminded him of the village's trustworthiness, he realized he needn't fight Hiruzen. After all, the third loved the village as deeply as anyone. He could be trusted to do right by it, even if his vision was limited. The third Hokage studied Orochimaru, saw the sincerity behind his glasses, and after a long moment nodded. "Very well, they may go." "Hiruzen?" Danzo snapped, anger and panic flaring. He was in no position to be as harsh as usual. He carried part of the blame for the daimyo's death. "He's my disciple, Danzo. I trust him," Hiruzen said quietly, but firmly. Placing a steadying hand on his old comrade's shoulder, he added, "We still have to deal with the daimyo's affairs. We cannot let the Fire Country fall into chaos, and we cannot let Konoha suffer." Danzo exhaled. "I've already ordered Root to intercept all outgoing reports and to prevent anyone from leaving Konoha. We need to keep news of the daimyo's death contained for now." "You've done well," Hiruzen said. "I'll send Jiraiya and Shamo to the capital to inform the Fire Lord and hope they can calm the political situation there." He took a long drag of his pipe and let the smoke out in a slow sigh. "I fear a war is all but inevitable. Whoever killed the daimyo, or whoever will use his death, will give other nations a pretext to strike at the Fire Country and at Konoha. Orochimaru's presence here only unsettles some people." Outside the politics, Orochimaru led Jiangju and the others to the Senju clan house. Orochimaru himself would never formally join the Senju, but Tsunade had wanted them to stay. She wanted companions nearby now more than the title's ceremonial trappings. For a man like Orochimaru, always absorbed in research, hosting a few guests was nothing, and it would keep Tsunade from being alone while he continued his experiments. "I wanted you to attend the wedding and rest," Orochimaru told Jiangju later in the Senju residence. "I'm sorry it turned out like this." Jiangju grinned. "It's fine. This kid is a walking disaster. Wherever he goes, nothing stays dead for long." He nudged Konan playfully. Konan, who'd been sulking about not being allowed to investigate the case, scowled. "Say that again and I'll—" Jiangju cooed soothingly, as if calming a toddler. "Don't cry, Konan." "I am not a child," Konan protested, stomping his short legs. Jiangju laughed and lifted him up with one hand. "I admit I'm getting smaller and acting like a spoiled child more and more," he teased. Xiongba, watching the little scene, turned to Orochimaru with a serious look. "It seems war is unavoidable. Whoever is blamed for the daimyo's death, other nations will leap at the chance to attack the Fire Country and Konoha. I don't think it'll be long now." Orochimaru's jaw tightened. His parents had been casualties of war. He hated it, but hatred alone did not stop politics from grinding toward conflict. Xiongba's voice was calm. "If you need help, come to the tavern. You'll always have allies there." Orochimaru smiled, grateful but proud. He wouldn't ask the tavern's patrons for aid lightly, but the offer mattered. Jiangju knew staying in Konoha was no longer wise for outsiders like them. The third would likely call on Orochimaru and Tsunade at any moment. After lunch, Jiangju decided he and his group would return to the tavern. Orochimaru agreed. This was a moment when the village needed its strongest defenders close at hand. He promised to invite them back when things calmed, to show them more of this world. This trip had been far too short anyway, and many of Orochimaru's plans had been interrupted. "Don't bully Sister Tsunade, Orochimaru, or I won't let you go," Luster warned on the way out, making Tsunade smile. "Don't worry," Tsunade said, her hand warm in her husband's. She still radiated the happiness of newlywed bliss, despite the grim turn of events. Jiangju looked at Luster and shook his head. This dragon-blooded girl was hopeless. He only hoped there wouldn't be any tavern fights between a mistress and a former wife. 3 furious women together would be terrifying. "All right, time to go. Be careful when the war starts, and don't die on me." Jiangju waved, his farewell half-blessing, half-curse. With that, Jiangju, Xiangba, Gandalf, and the rest slipped out of the world of the shinobi and back toward the tavern. The hurried wedding celebration had come to an abrupt end with the daimyo's death, and the village braced itself for the storms moving across the horizon. Chapter 25. A Mother's Kindness, a Son's Filial Piety. This story begins a long time ago. The small, pitch-black figure began, staring up at the ceiling as if it could still see the sky it remembered. Back then, the sky was bluer and the earth greener. There wasn't even a moon to light the nights, but the world was beautiful enough to enchant my mother. "Cut it out. We want facts, not fairy tales." Xiaohei swatted the speaker on the head and snapped, "How did you even end up with us?" The shadowy thing spoke with the same innocent tone. "I was shopping in Konoha that day when I saw a man who always wore that straw hat. He looked different, like he didn't belong to this world, so I went over out of curiosity." "And?" Xiaohei prompted. "As soon as I touched him, I was pulled into his body. I tried to go back to my own, but the scene shifted, and suddenly I was here." "You mean you ate dinner with us as a ghost and waved goodbye to Orochimaru?" Xiaohei growled. A man in a gray kimono and green-striped hat, Urahara Kisuke, interrupted, waving an open fan in one hand. "What he saw could be called ghosts, I suppose. Ghosts and things like him are similar, human souls without a place to stay." "You mean you didn't realize your body was already being used?" Xiaohei said blankly. Jiangju gave a small smile. "He's curious, that's all. This wasn't actually his body, but a prosthetic skeleton. For him, making a few gimmicks by hand is nothing. He probably didn't think much of it." Urahara nodded, smiling as if it were no big deal. "We trapped him, put him into a spare body, and kept him in Orochimaru-kun's lab." He chuckled. "When Boss brought the others back, somehow he brought this thing with him." Xiaohai's eyes widened. He'd seen plenty of spirits, but this was something else. The dark entity had been writhing inside Urahara's shell like a deflating balloon until Xiaohei tore it out with his claws, a spectacle of light and shadow that left him rattled. Gandalf, who had been watching curiously, leaned forward. "So what is it exactly? It looks like slime." Jiangju answered calmly. "This one is the most filial son you'll find in the ninja world. He's been stirring up trouble across ninja history to save his mother. The first and second ninja wars, he had a hand in them. Whatever happened here may well be another one of his methods." "You're saying that blob is Heizetsu?" Xiaohei exclaimed. Jiangju nodded. "Yes, he's one of Kaguya Otsutsuki's younger children." Xiaohei's expression shifted from interest to alarm. "We've caught something big." The creature addressed now stiffened. "Who are you? How do you know about my mother and my plans?" it demanded. It no longer sounded innocent. "I know a lot," Jiangju said, "but if you're in this tavern, I'm afraid your luck has run out." He sighed and produced a small card from his sleeve. With a practiced gesture, he sealed the creature onto the card. "Hey, those were good experimental materials," Urahara said with a mock vengeful grin. "Honestly," Jiangju said dryly to Urahara, "what you did was recklessly irresponsible. You knew there was something living in that prosthetic, and you didn't tell anyone. You could have ruined your world." Xiaohai scowled. "You almost killed us by surprise. How can you be so careless?" Urahara shrugged and offered the barest hint of an apology. "My bad, it won't happen again." "Then promise me," Jiangju said, Next time something like this happens, tell us first. If you take things back to their own world, you might destroy that world by accident." He gave the room a tired look. "We're all exhausted. The shop will be open as usual tomorrow. Feel free to stop by again." His words made the point clear. Everyone had gained something from this time-slip episode, but it was time to go. After quick farewells, the patrons drifted out of the tavern and into the night. Alone now, Jiangju turned on his computer and checked up on Tony Stark. He'd been away for 2 days and was naturally curious about how the timeline changes were settling. News reports showed that Iron Man had been ambushed by the Iron Legion on the road the day before. The reports were scant, but Jiangju used a few of his tools to pull more footage. It had been a close call. In the video, Tony's car was surrounded by drones and automated armor, but a silver-haired man in a sports car had arrived and forced the Legion to back off. With that stranger there, nothing could really happen to Iron Man. "Looks like there's nothing to worry about," Xiao He said from Jiangju's shoulder. "But I think the real show is about to start." "It's the beginning of the superhero era," Jiangju replied with a small smile. "Thor in New Mexico, Hulk in Brazil, Tony in New York. It's only a matter of time before the Avengers get officially formed." "Don't forget the soldier in the advanced ward," Xiao He said, looking up. "I checked on him last time. He's almost recovered." "Perfect," Jiangju said as he watched the city lights. "A flashy age like this will make a few people very happy." "Those are the words villains love to hear," Xiao He muttered, half teasing, half warning. For all the promise a brilliant era held for the powerful, Jiangju knew it would not be so kind to everyone else. Chapter 26. My Mission. My name is Loki, second prince of Asgard, keeper of secrets and wielder of craft. I live in a glittering court that rules the 9 realms. My father is Odin, the All-Father, a god-king feared and revered across worlds. My mother is Frigga, gentle, warm, and a powerful magician in her own right. I have an older brother, Thor, who rushes headlong into everything and thinks a man's problems are best solved with his fists. We grew up together, trained together, played together. He despises magic. To him, strength is muscle and thunder. I find that vulgar, unbefitting a prince of Asgard. Still, people treat me oddly. No matter what I do, I feel their eyes on me, cold, wary, as if I am always about to take something that belongs to someone else. Perhaps they fear I will seize the throne from my brother. But I have never wanted that crown. All I want is my father's approval and a family that is whole. That seems too small a wish for anyone to be suspicious of, yet suspicion clings to me. Today I am angry because father seems to like Thor more. Is it because I refuse to be reckless? Because I choose study over brawling? I tried to win his favor once, and I was humiliated. Father told me not to lower myself with unsuitable pursuits, as if the study of magic is a stain on my status. What does he mean, not in line with my station? I only want to be stronger, to prove myself worthy in his eyes. Then I discovered something else about Thor that only made me angrier. He invented a childish prank, some crude cry-for-help game that is beneath us. It's brainless and humiliating, and yet some part of me, I felt a flicker of amusement. No, Loki, that's an illusion. I must be tired, imagining things. I swear I will never play that idiotic game again. If I do, I will make him regret it. Still, that game had its uses. It is crude, but effective against those who are less sharp. I just wish I weren't always the one on the receiving end. Thor will inherit the throne no matter what mistakes he makes. Birthright, destiny, whatever you call it. Why should I care? Why does he have to taunt me when I walk by as if he wants to make me jealous? Jealous of Thor? Ha! Ridiculous. Well, maybe I am a little jealous. Not of the throne, but of the way father indulges him, while I am always corrected, pushed, told to be better. Mother says father is shaping me into something greater. But what does great mean if it doesn't include love? Fighting with Thor is not satisfying. There is no joy in beating him. He adapts so quickly, as if he were born for battle. He draws followers like a storm, men who flock to his cause and call themselves his brothers. They have strength and skill. Their loyalty to him makes me uneasy. What if some are spies? What if they watch me the way everyone else does? I refuse to yield. No more passive smiles, no more endurement. As a prince of Asgard, I have as much right to the throne as any heir. No one will stop me, not you, not father. I refuse to be ignored. Father has been acting strange lately, and my plan is already in motion. I can't write more here. There's too much to do. Today I saw a strange door. I wonder if I should walk through it. At last I know why I have never been fully accepted. I am not his child. The truth stung like cold iron. I am not of Odin's blood. How ironic. How cruel. Why did they let me live here among them, with the lie hanging over everything? I hate you. I am leaving. Frigga stood in Loki's room, holding the unfinished pages she had found. The entries were jagged, raw, a child's hurt and a prince's scheming pressed together. Memory and worry weighed her features, and, despite herself, her eyes had grown wet. Across the palace, Odin lay wrapped in shimmering golden light, unconscious since he had used his last strength to save their son Thor. He had returned to the palace weakened and comatose. Only Loki had brought him back. It would have been easy for Loki to kill him in that state. He did not. Instead, he had delivered Odin to Frigga, quietly and without fanfare. In the entire palace, perhaps Frigga was the only one who truly understood Loki's contradictions. She had not blamed him harshly when he returned with their fallen king. When Odin's fall left the throne unstable, she had taken the harder choice, defended Loki from banishment, and allowed him to govern Asgard temporarily until Odin awoke. He wasn't badly hurt. Loki's voice came from the doorway. He looked at the sleeping king with a complex expression. You brought him back in time. Will he be all right? You did well to return him when you did, Frigga answered, studying him with tired affection. He is old. He needed rest. It will take time. I went to that tavern, Loki said, avoiding her gaze. I didn't bring him any of the wines he needed. I'm sorry. Frigga's expression softened. That tavern is dangerous. I did not want you to be drawn into it. The owner did nothing to me, though I find him annoying, Loki said with a little bitterness. If it hadn't been for him, I might have avoided all this. But the tavern only sped time forward. Even without it, I had planned to force Thor aside. I did not expect Father to be so fragile. Frigga's hand brushed the diary pages in her lap. She had read enough to know the depth of his unrest. What are you planning, Loki? She asked, gently but with mounting alarm. There was a tremor in her voice she did not mean to show. I have found my mission, Loki said calmly. In a book, a human tale, I read of how a prince could change fate. I checked, I tested, I learned. I will prove to Father that he is wrong in some things. Perhaps Thor would make a fine king. Perhaps I would not be bad as one either. I will show Asgard that I can save them. Frigga felt a chill. The diary's pages had hinted at this. A point of no return had been nearing faster than she realized. Loki, she said, the name a plea, do not go down this road. You do not know the cost. He only smiled slightly, and with a small motion of his hand, sealed the palace with a spell. Do not break the seal, he murmured. It is for Odin's sake. His rest must not be disturbed. Loki's eyes were distant, as if sand lay in them. He lifted his head, looked at the vaulted roof of the hall, and breathed in deeply. Then he turned and walked away. Loki, Frigga called after him, but her voice hung in the air uselessly. The charm over the palace muffled and folded sound. She could only watch his back as he left. Is Ragnarok really unavoidable? Loki, why would you choose this path? She lowered her head. The diary in her hands, the last thing he had written before he went, smoldered and turned to ash, drifting away in the still, heavy air. Chapter 27. Tavern Upgrades. Ice Age. Jiangju had been gone for 2 days. During that time, the tavern's abilities were quietly improved. Several of Xiaohei's suggestions were accepted, a few magical functions were added, and the boundary gate tattoo was altered so more people could learn about the tavern. A simple forum site attached to the tavern had been opened. When Jiangju returned at midnight, everyone in the dimensional world and across the universe who had ever entered the tavern found the boundary gate tattoo on their skin. The mark didn't grant time travel or anything dramatic. For many, it was just a symbol, a link. It functioned like a bare-bones website, Yujian Tavern. The site had only a few tabs: forum, task, space, and video, and the homepage offered a brief introduction to the tavern. The videos showed mission walkthroughs from various worlds. There wasn't much else. The site had just been launched and few people knew about it. The site did include tasks and a set of reading links. Newcomers were expected to read and understand the tavern before they arrived. There were only 49 seats in the tavern. Extra bodies couldn't simply take a place. The site was intended as a convenient gateway for those who truly needed its help, a way for them to discover the tavern without endless waiting. For many, it was a glimmer of hope. Far away, under an endless blanket of ice and snow, a huge crater held a steampunk-styled energy tower. People in layered leather hauled ores and coal into its maw in endless chain. Their faces were hollow. There was no light of life in them, only the look of the living dead. Around the tower stood a ring of simple houses linked by steam pipes that carried the tower's heat to each dwelling. The houses were only marginally warmer than the air. Because supplies were low, the tower dared not run at full power. It provided just enough warmth to stop people from freezing to death. How long will this last? A middle-aged man in a thick fur coat, fur hat, and goggles stood knee-deep in concern in front of the tower and sighed. The deep winter was coming. A brutal cold that could dip to -80 Celsius, and the resources they had were not enough to get everyone through it. The coal is almost gone. We have to explore other areas, the Minister of Resources reported in a low voice. Then send parties to search, the mayor said, frowning. We must find something to keep people alive through the winter, or we'll all die. But they're already complaining about 14-hour shifts. Some are ill and lying in the infirmary, untreated, the minister said, worrying. The mayor's face tightened with irritation. Sometimes he felt like doing nothing, but that wasn't an option. They might be the last survivors on Earth. The city housed nearly 4,000 people. Although the winter had arrived suddenly, they'd managed to survive so far, and surviving meant working to survive longer, not indulging in nostalgia over an 8-hour workday. They had to keep up their duties and resist the continual desire to strike. This was not the world they'd known before. He called for the city administration to meet and walked with the Minister of Resources toward a 3-story building near the tower, the city's political center. The mayor sat on a simple chair, patched together with leather and straw, waiting for officials to arrive. The room was a relatively warm 8 degrees Celsius, a sharp contrast to the -20 outside. Without fuel, the tower was nothing but a rusting monument. When he sat there, the mayor suddenly noticed an odd warmth against his forearm through his sleeves. He frowned and rolled up his sleeves despite the cold. Etched on his skin was a strange tattoo, a likeness of a wooden door. He touched it. A light flared and a suggested website interface bloomed in his vision. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Mr. Mayor, are you all right?" Scott called as he pushed open the bathroom door. It was obvious the mayor had forgotten to lock it. The mayor held out his arm. "Did you see this?" Scott came closer, worried. "Other than your arm being a bit red from the cold, I don't see anything. Are you sure you're okay?" Sams, the mayor, looked at Scott and felt a moment of alarm. He and Scott had both served this city for years. Over the past 2 decades, many mayors had come and gone, assassinations, removals for incompetence, or swept away by riots when a harsh policy sparked a collapse. He knew real power often lay with the ministers, not the office of the mayor. Sams made himself put on his leather coat, tightened it, and forced a tired laugh. "I must be hallucinating from the stress. The winter's coming, and I've been under too much pressure." "You need to take care of yourself," Scott said, clearly concerned. "If you're not well, we can postpone today's meeting. You need to rest." "No." Sams shook his head. "You'll preside over today's meeting. We can't let people stop. Any movement keeps them a bit warmer. Also, put people on watch for the children. We can't afford a repeat of before." He hesitated, eyeing his arm again. He decided not to mention the tattoo. There was no reason to alarm his ministers or open himself to political manipulation until he understood what it was. With that, he stood and headed toward the council room, leaving the mystery of the wooden door burning quietly beneath his sleeve. He would investigate it later. For now, the city's affairs came first. Chapter 28. The Distressed Jiangju. After the mayor left, Sam returned to his small house. It was like everyone else's, a simple wooden frame faced with stone. The one thing his place had more of was books, stacks of them everywhere. In this cold world, reading had become a luxury. People weren't opposed to books, they simply had no time or resources. Surviving a single day left little for anything else. Sam lay on his bed and stared at the device hovering over him. The interface responded to his thoughts. He controlled it with his mind. Having read widely, he adapted to the device quickly, and what he found shocked him: a listing for something called a tavern. Could it really be real? He frowned and kept reading, not jumping to conclusions. The site rewarded him with a few virtual coins for browsing. He'd meant to ignore them, but curiosity won. He opened the video section and found several immersive experiences available for purchase. One title read, "The Hobbit and the Dragon-Slaying Heroes Conquer Middle-earth." Sam bought it on impulse and let the simulation take him. When he came back to himself, he was standing in a strange place. The immersion had made the tattoo on his arm thrummingly obvious. It was not a trivial mark. The tavern, whatever it was, had to be real. A hot thrill ran through him. If the tavern could link to other worlds, he thought, maybe its help could save people here, help them survive the cold winter, maybe even rebuild civilization. How do you get into a place like that? He wondered aloud. Countless people across countless worlds asked the same question when they suspected the tavern's existence. Some were joking, pointing out that a bar existed in New York in one of the comic book universes. Yet Sam's heartbeat had sped for a reason he couldn't deny. Jiangju woke with a yawn and drifted to the bathroom like a sleepwalker. After tending to the basics, he floated down to the tavern's common room. Xiaohei lay curled on the cat-shaped sofa with a laptop open, the tavern's website glowing on the screen. "Morning, Jiangju," Xiaohei said. "Take a look. Someone's already talking about us on the forum." Jiangju slid into his chair and transformed it into a recliner, but even before he could settle, his face told the real story. He looked haggard, like someone who'd been sleepless for days. Pale, dark eyes shadowed in exhaustion, he stared at nothing. "What's wrong?" Xiaohei asked, alarmed. "Everything I earned from running this tavern, gone," Jiangju said in a flat voice. "All our sales since we opened. It's all been poured into upgrading the tavern, a bottomless pit." "You're serious?" Xiaohei leapt up and grabbed Jiangju's shoulders. "You put all the money into—" "It wasn't just money," Jiangju interrupted. His voice wavered. "It was the will of the people. The wishes we collected since we opened, they've been consumed to upgrade the tavern." Xiaohei cocked his head. "Wishes? What are you talking about?" "The willpower we gathered by opening our doors, the hopes, the prayers, that power could have made an ordinary mortal ascend to immortality," Jiangju said, eyes lost in the distance. "We spent all of that on an upgrade." Xiaohei's mouth fell open. "You mean like becoming an immortal? There are a lot of ways people talk about immortality. I didn't think you meant—" "Not the kind you mentioned," Jiangju snapped. "I mean the immortality of our original world, the kind everyone in the 3,000 worlds ultimately strives toward. The qualitative leap. When someone reaches it, they aren't just powerful, they're on another plane entirely." Xiaohei sat down slowly, reflecting. He'd benefited from Jiangju's efforts and knew a little of what Jiangju had in mind, but the reality stunned him. "I'm a demon immortal," he said quietly. "In my state, I can easily take down so-called immortal emperors or god kings in other worlds. But what you're talking about, the immortals of your world, aren't even visible to beings from other dimensions. They're beyond sensing." Jiangju scowled. "We could have used that power to give someone a true ascension." "I get it," Xiaohei said, "but why upgrade if it costs so much?" "They put up a new public communications platform, expanded the forum, improved the interface," Jiangju said bitterly. "People saw it and started to hope. If you give them hope and then take it away, you know what happens on the forum." Xiaohei huffed. "You're afraid of a few angry posts?" "They can't hit me through the internet," Jiangju said, deadpan. "But their scorn, the mocking, the hissing from the comments, those words will frighten me to death." Xiaohei rubbed his forehead. He had peeked at some of the posts earlier, and in hindsight, regretted it. If he hadn't looked, he might not have mentioned certain things to Jiangju. If Jiangju hadn't read them, he might not have authorized the costly upgrade that drained their reserves of willpower. "Well," Xiaohei said finally, trying to be practical, "there's nothing to do now but face it. You made the call on the tavern, and you own it." Jiangju shook his head. "Owning it doesn't make this easier. People will expect miracles because we opened the door, and if we take hope away, He let the sentence hang, the fear clear on his face. Xiaohei sighed. He reached for a stick of bamboo candy, chewed thoughtfully, and tried to find a way to steady his friend. The tavern glowed quietly around them. The forum's threads buzzed like distant flies. Outside, the world remained cold, and inside, the consequences of their choices burned brighter than any hearth. Chapter 29. Expectations for Zhaosu Jiangju spent the whole day listless in his chair, half-hearted even when greeting friends. He looked so out of sorts that nobody dared pry. They were curious about the tavern's new website, but seeing Jiangju like this, they quietly went off to examine it themselves. Fortunately, some tech-savvy visitors had already uploaded basic guides and instructions, and even offered small rewards. That drew more attention, and before long, the tavern's web forum began to take off. The platform turned out to be unexpectedly useful. Emperors like Qin Shi Huang could check in on things without abandoning state affairs, and people from other worlds could set meeting times to do business without being idle for long. "Hey, how long are you going to sulk like this?" Xiaohei snapped, watching Zhang Ju with exasperation. "You're wasting a ridiculous amount of willpower." "This is what it's like being a leader versus an employee," Zhang Ju replied quietly. "It's like standing in one place and pretending my back doesn't hurt." Xiaohei huffed. "I'll stop lecturing. Just trying to console you. Leave me to it. I'll be fine in 8 or 10 days. Zhang Ju waved him off. That made Xiaohei bristle with fury. "Humph, I'm done with you," he stormed out. The guests in the tavern burst into laughter. This scene had played out here countless times. Zhang Ju had a talent for driving Xiaohei mad, but they always patched things up eventually. Sherlock, browsing the site, nodded thoughtfully. "This could work. I might post the cases I've solved and the methods I used." "That's fine," Lu Xiaofeng said with a smile. "It'll let us compare notes. And it's perfect for watching the cat under the covers on a rainy day," someone teased, and everyone laughed. "Look, people from other worlds are already talking about the tavern," another guest said. "There's a help thread, and wow, someone mentioned a doomsday world." The man who had killed Matt nodded grimly. With the website new and everyone poking around, the tavern filled with chatter and browsing. Jiang Ju was almost ready to chase them out. If they didn't spend any money, he had no income. "Boss, what's with the mood?" a familiar voice asked. Zhao Shu stepped in, dressed in a casual tunic suit and wearing his hair long. He looked almost jaunty. Jiang Ju glanced up in mild disbelief. "Who dressed you like that?" "I saw Mr. Xing wear it the other day and thought I'd try it," Zhao Shu said with a smile. "It's nice to dress down sometimes." Jiang Ju snorted. "That long hair and tunic don't suit you. They're more like a military parade uniform." He paused. "Still, if you ever want to promote soldiers, it's an appropriate look. Those decisions are for when I'm actually in charge," Zhao Shu shrugged. "Right now, I'm still at the stage of watching other people's backsides." "You said you managed to control people with a life-and-death talisman," Jiang Ju said, flopping his head on the table. "The talisman lets me bind certain servants so they obey me," Zhao Shu answered plainly. "It doesn't give me authority over a country." Jiang Ju sat up, eyes brightening. "Not bad. You've actually learned a lot. Did you come because the underground palace is finished?" Jiang Ju asked. "Yes, we renovated it according to the designs Zero and Lakshata provided," Zhao Shu replied. "I wanted you to notify them that it's done." "You ordered the construction robots yourself, didn't you?" Jiang Ju asked. "100 engineering bots, plus the necessary materials," Zhao Shu said. "But the robots only had the palace schematics. Once the palace was completed, they self-destructed." "That's because I insisted on putting that clause in the contract," Jiang Ju said evenly. "Skynet is an artificial intelligence system that's profoundly anti-human. You can't trust it. If you had, it wouldn't just be the Song dynasty at risk. It could have destroyed an entire world." "Isn't everyone in the tavern on our side?" Zhao Su asked, young and somewhat naive despite his imperial title. "I never said that," Jiang Ju replied. "There are good people here, and there are people who aren't, relatively speaking. Don't be so trusting. I can't always protect you." Zhao Su straightened, saluting with sincere respect. "Thank you, Boss Jiang. I appreciate it. I personally chose you and asked Xiao Feng to escort you to the tavern," Jiang Ju said with a small smile. I hope you'll do something to revive the Song dynasty. Imagine future generations in your time speaking Chinese because of what you started. That would be incredible. It'll take effort from me and my descendants, Zhao Su said, a touch of longing in his voice. He knew he couldn't do it alone. Work hard, Jiangju said, patting the young emperor's shoulder. Even if you don't live to see it, I might. Zhao Su almost hit him. The tone was encouraging, but that last line stung. Still, he accepted the sentiment. You can contact Zero yourself, Jiangju continued. They're all discussing things on the tavern's webpage. Once you learn to use it, you can talk to Zero in another world. Webpage, Zhao Su blinked. I saw it on the way here, but I closed it because I didn't know how to use it. There's a user guide Xiao Hei wrote for you, Jiangju said, glancing for his absent assistant. But since Xiao Hei's gone, I'll teach you. Thank you, boss, Zhao Shu said, visibly relieved. And while we're at it, Jiangju added with a grin, how about you buy a few rounds in return?